Alright, hello! This is my first deck tech video. This is for blue-red Izzet's Elementals deck that I've been working on. I really like making homebrews and, rogue decks and stuff like that, and I really want to make certain cards at least viable. And this deck is actually quite surprising. I've been having good amount of wins, especially against some popular decks such as Orzhov Control and stuff like that. I've won. I think mostly for the fact that they underestimate how fast this deck goes, and this deck can get pretty big pretty fast depending on how the early game plays out. But overall, I'm playing around Niv Magus Elementals, a card that's generally not really good, but with the amount of instances I have, and just the support from the other creatures I have, there's some good synergy there, and it's worked out quite well. And Niv Magus can get pretty big pretty fast. He can potentially be a 5/6 on turn 3, so that's always nice, or turn 2 even, depending on what my starting hand is. So I really like him, and he can beat down pretty fast. The rest of my creatures are generally to support him, but they also have some quite good value themselves. Maybe not Blister Coil Weird so much, but he's just a good one-drop for this deck. But let's go through the creatures first. I got a playset of all my creatures. First creature is Blister Coil Weird. I just wanted a solid one-drop, and his effect works well with this deck. It's nice to be able to just get a little bit of extra damage off of whenever I try to pump Niv Magus up, but swinging in for 2 second turn is nice. And he can be fairly aggressive, but he's mainly honestly there for chump blocking. He's nice to chump block with because I can attack with him, and then if I do happen to use a spell like a shock or a counter spell on my opponent's turn, I can untap him and be ready to block for a chumping. That's all pretty much why he's there. Niv Magus is the other one drop and the card that I'm focusing on. He's pretty hard to play around because you really have to be sure of if you want to use your spells to pump him up, or if you want to use your spells in the way that they're supposed to. But he gets 2 1/1 counters each time you exile instant or sorcery you control, and it's a little bit odd. Not many people, it's not a card that sees much light, so not many people understand it. I had to read up on it exactly how it worked when I first read it, but you actually have to exile cards off of the stack. So once you cast a spell, such as if I had Niv Magus out and I casted a Quicken or a Shock or something like that, once it's casted, it's on the stack. So from the stack, I would use Niv Magus's ability and exile it. So you got to make sure that you really want to choose what you want to do, because once you exile it, it doesn't resolve. So just keep that in mind if you're playing this deck or any deck with Niv Magus in it. But you do get 2 1/1 counters out of it, so one pump will turn him into a 3/4, and a second pump will turn him into a 5/6, which is quite big bodies for really early on. I really like Niv Magus because him being a 1/2 and pumping him up on turn 2, it right away puts him out of the range of things such as Last Breath and Shock and Lightning Strike all at the same time. And that's really, really huge with the amount of removal there is in Standard right now. So it's really nice being able to pump him up just once and have him be out of range of those cards, and they require pretty much hard removal such as Doom Blades or something like that, or Chained at the Rocks to actually get rid of him. So that's pretty much why he's there, and he has some good synergy with the rest of my creatures because the theme pretty much through this is instants and sorceries triggers. So all 3 of my other creatures have whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell. So even if I am going to be pumping up Niv Magus, whenever I cast a spell to exile, it's going to be triggering Nivix, it's going to be triggering Young Pyromancer, it's going to be triggering Blister Coil Weird. So even if I do cast a Shock, once I cast it, it triggers all 3 of my other guys, and then I can exile it and still get a pump off of. So it's some nice synergy there, and it definitely ups the pace of my board. So I really like that. Young Pyromancer, just a really solid card to have for burn decks, any sort of burn focused or instant speed decks, and just creating chump blockers. That's all he is a chump blocker generator. He can swing in for 2 when he can, which is nice, but overall just to create a more of a defensive board state for myself to keep back some of the larger guys or chump block or potentially swing in with tokens and get some more damage in. Yeah, it's just nice to have early on. Nivix Cyclops is sort of an underestimated card in my opinion, other than the fact that I absolutely love the art in it. I love the way it looks. It's a really solid body for 3 mana, so it's a 1/4 for 3. But that one power it has is quite prevalent against aggro decks. So especially the white aggro deck with Splash Red that runs a lot of like Dryad Militants, Soldier of the Pantheon. So a lot of cards that have 2 power and 1 toughness, because they can't attack into Nivix without being destroyed rather than just not doing anything. So it really makes my opponent slow down with their attacks and actually have to build up a board state first. But it's nice with the amount of semi-removal I have with shock and stuff like that. I can get triggers off as well as still remove some of their smaller creatures and then swing in with Nivix because of the activation. So I really like him. He also is quite underestimated that he can get quite large for 1 swing in, because on turn, so let's say, turn 1, just play a land. If I get a land drop every turn and I have Nivix in my opening hand, or at least draw him within those turns, turn 3, I can play him, and then turn 4 I can swing in with him for potentially 7 damage. So how that works is I'm fine with spending a Quicken and a Shock or something. I can use a Shock to take out one of their chump blockers to clear the way for Nivix, and then I can use Quicken to draw a card as well as do another activation off of Nivix. And what that does is makes him a 7/4. It makes him a 7/4 that he can swing in, because he gets +3/+0 for each instant and sorcery you cast. So swinging in for 7 damage is really, really strong. Even on turn 4, it's quite nice, because even if they did get Pelucranos out, if it's the only thing there that can block, he either takes 7 damage or he has to trade with me. And I'm fine with trading a Nivix for a Pelucranos, because again, this deck can get back pretty fast. And again, while I'm casting those instances to pump him up to the 7/4, I can exile that last instant to, like, if I casted Shock to remove a creature and then cast a Quicken to just exile the pump up Niv Magus, I can still pump up Niv Magus and get 2 triggers off of Nivix, and depending on what else I have on the board, potentially 2 tokens, potentially make Blister Coil a 3/3 till end of turn. So a lot of my cards work well together, and Nivix is sort of a curveball in the sense that I don't think people think that he's much of a threat, because they can just remove him. But it's nice to be able to swing in for quite a bit of damage and still have a decent blocker on the field. I'm including, for anything non-creature, I'm including 2 copies of Steam Augury. I don't need too much card draw in this deck, because it just runs on such a low mana curve, and I can generally run off of quite a few things. It's mostly just to refill my hand up slightly, so I can just have more things up, more Mizium Skins, Shocks, Lightning Strikes, whatever, as well as to draw into more fuel for Niv Magus, because that's the goal. It's like I want to make Niv Magus quite big, quite early, and just beat down my opponent. And Steam Augury just helps that, turn 5 and on, or turn 4 and on. It's also nice because it's instant speed, so I can play it on my opponent's turn and still get triggers off of the rest of my guys. So that's always nice. But it's not a must need to have card draw in this deck, so that's why I'm only including 2 of, just for the certain situations where I do need to draw into something I really need. Again, that's the same reason why I have only 2 Quickens in there, is just for those certain situations to draw a card, to grab something I need, as well as still having a nice 1 drop to trigger off the rest of my guys, as well as if anything, I can use it to exile to pump up Niv Magus even more. I have 2 copies of Essence Scatter. This deck isn't control heavy. It's not made to be control heavy, but I do need those spot removals, because these guys cannot, until Niv Magus gets big, and even if he does get big, it sometimes can't combat with some of the larger creatures out there. So I need Essence Scatter to spot counter those certain cards that I can't deal with early on, like early Pelucranos. If I don't have a Nivix Cyclops out or anything like that, nothing to combat it with. If none of my guys are really pumped up or anything like that, Pelucranos Monstrosity just wipes my board. So I really just don't want him on the field. So Essence Scatter's there just to potentially counter him before he even gets on the board. I won't counter anything that's, like 3 toughness or 4 toughness. But Pelucranos is a 4-drop for 5, like a 5/5 for 4 mana, and that's something I can't really deal with that early on. So Essence Scatter is there just to make sure it doesn't hit the board. Also things such as Desecration Demon early on or later on. Again, it's a really cheap spell for a really strong effect, and it's not too bad for me because I can create 1/1 tokens to sacrifice to keep Desecration Demon on hold. But if I don't have Young Pyromancer and I don't have tokens, I don't really want to be sacrificing all my other guys because I don't run a creature heavy deck, so I got to make sure I protect them. Mizium Skin is another way to protect them. It's pretty much the the blue equivalent of Ranger's Guile in green, so it just gives my guy hexproof until end of turn as well as a bump up in toughness. But I can also overload it, which is nice, so I can protect all my creatures from something. But I generally won't really need to overload much. It's mostly fuel for my Niv Mages as well. So if I happen to have Mizium Skin in my opening hand, and I notice he's playing like sort of like a mono green or something like that, something with not a lot of spot removal, I can just use Mizium as a more fuel for Niv Mages. So that's one of the nice things about this deck is I can always adjust and adapt and play things out differently, depending on, this deck doesn't have a certain specific route it goes, which is nice. And again, I can just use it for spot protection for Nivix or Young Pyromancer if I absolutely need to. And as well as going with a theme, it's instant speed, so always get triggers off on these guys. I have 4 copies of Hidden Strings. This is like my piece de resistance. It's a really, really, really good card in this deck, and overall, in my opinion, it's quite a good card in general. But it's better in an aggressive deck. I just like playing aggressive decks mainly, so this is why I have 4 copies of it. I tested with 2, and I found just how much it impacted my game. I need 4 of. I need to have it pretty early on, and I need to be getting a lot of activations off, because you're potentially getting 2 activations off if you hit them once you play it. So you can get 2 tokens. You can make Nivix a 7/4. You can make Blister Coil Weird a 3/3. And you can also you can actually use Niv Mages to exile the copy of Hidden Strings. So how that works is, let's say I cast Hidden Strings onto Nivix Cyclops. Well, first of all, I cast Hidden Strings, so it allows me to tap and untap target permanent. So what I'll do there is I will probably tap down 2 of their blockers if they have 2 creatures out there, and then so it clears the way for Nivix to attack. Or I might untap 2 of my land. You can untap your land, which is really, really awesome, to have more mana up to cast a Lightning Strike or something like that. So once that happens, I can cipher it. So I cipher it on a Nivix. Nivix swings in for 4, hits the player because I've tapped down their blockers, and then activates again. So I can cast a copy of Hidden Strings for free. Now at that point, it's nice because it also double triggers whatever else I have on the board. So it gives Young Pyromancer another token, so potentially 2 tokens in 1 turn, and makes Blister Coil a 3/3 until end of turn. I mean, that one's not very good, but also the copy of it being casted, I can exile it with Niv Mages. Niv Mages actually has the ability to copy or to exile copies of spells you control as long as you control them. So it's nice that I can get in for 4, untap mana, and still be able to pump up Niv Mages all at the same time. So that's really, really nice. And there's a lot of, that's just one of the examples. There's tons of things you can do with Hidden Strings, and that's one of the reasons why I really like it. It's really versatile, and it definitely has won me most of my games, just because you can untap land to leave mana up for counters. You can tap down their blockers. You can untap your guys after they've attacked to block again. So that's why it's just really prominent for me to clear my opponent's board with early removal and then be able to swing in for hidden strings triggers. Izzet Charm, I'm only running a 3 of. I don't really think I needed 4 of them. The counter is pretty much the main thing I'm going to be using it for, to counter non-creature spell, because I do have Essence Scatters for creatures, but I don't have any way to counter stuff such as artifacts or enchantments or things like that, or planeswalkers. And those are always really popular, especially now. Some of the weapons, such as Spear of Heliod, is pretty popular in aggro decks, and that's just something I don't want on the board. I can't have it on the board, otherwise I pretty much lose. And blue-red doesn't really have any way to get rid of enchantments once they're on the board, so I just pretty much need to counter them. We do have Wear and Tear for getting rid of artifacts once they're on the board, but I don't also feel like I want to splash white to get Tear onto the board, so I can use white. I'm not really a fan of splashing. Just haven't had any really good luck with it. But that's probably just lack of experience. But overall, this has been working out really well. The counter is pretty much the only thing I need. It also counters any counters they have. So if I do counter something with Essence Scatter, I can counter that again. I can counter their counter with my Izzet Charm, so that's always nice. Dealing 2 damage to target creature, I'm not going to be using really at all, unless it's in a specific moment where I need to deal 2 damage to win the game. I just don't see much of a point in doing it. Drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards is another thing that I don't really think I'll need unless it's a certain circumstance where I need to draw into something like right away. And I have a lot of useless cards in my hands, but the one thing about this deck is like there's always a use for these cards, whether it's to pump up Niv Magus or to just leave it back to counter or something like that, which is nice. So there's always a use for the cards. So that's pretty much why I'm not using that. I'm mainly using it for the counter. But having the extra modes out there is nice for those certain situations, which is why I'm sort of taking it over something like Negate. I have 3 copies of Shocks and 3 copies of Lightning Strikes. So those just burn, instant burns to trigger off everyone else. But Shock is the main thing I'm going to be using to fuel Niv Magus. I'm not too worried about shocking 2 damage to player and 2 damage to creature. It occurs sometimes, but only if I really need to slow down their board. I'll shock 2 damage to their creature and destroy them. But again, more ways to trigger off Young Pyromancer, Cyclops, and Weird. Lightning Strike is mostly just pseudo removal, so removal for early things like a Colonial Tusker or something like that. Anything with toughness of 3 that I need to get rid of, or to finish off my opponent if they're down to 3 health. Lightning Strike them. I was running 4 copies of each and only 2 copies of Hidden Strings, but with how impactful Hidden Strings has been in my games, I just can't afford to not have 4 of them. Having them out early and copied onto my guys is just really, really important. So that's why I just removed 1 of each and just put in 2 more Hidden Strings. Land-wise, I'm running 21 lands. I'm running 9 islands and 8 mountains. I feel this is alright. I have a pretty even set between my deck. Oh, excuse me. So it's not bad. I've been having no problems with the mana base so far, but again, this deck needs quite a bit more playtesting, so we'll see. I am running Izzet Guildgates to just sort of fix my mana a little bit, because I am excuse me, I am running things that are dual colored, such as Nivix, Steam Augury, and Izzet Charm. But Guildgates aren't really the best way I want to do it, just because my deck's pretty aggressive and I want to be able to cast things right away. But shock lands are just too expensive right now. I mean, for me, I just don't really want to pay the money for shock lands right now. I have 1 Steam Vent, like in paper form, because I am going to be building this in paper form, but imagine Izzet Guildgates being Steam Vents, and that's what it would look like, is having the blue-red shock lands. If you don't know what shock lands are, Steam Vents is what I would need. So you pay 2 life and it comes in untapped. Otherwise it comes in tapped. just a really strong. Shock Lens are just really, really strong. It's nice to have that mana fix really, really early. And since this is an aggressive deck, and I really honestly don't mind losing 2 life. So yeah, moving on to the sideboard. Sideboard's a little bit odd because I'm adapting a different strategy when I sideboard things in. So against matchups where I need to adopt more of a burn control strategy, I'll take out my Niv Mage Elementals and I'll put in Spellheart Chimera to play more towards the late game and controlling their board through counters and removal through burn. So that's when I also include stuff as Negate and more Essence Scatter to, you know, just keep their board side of the board clear and just allow my stuff to stay on the board. So that's why I have more Magma Jet for more burn. The Scry also helps, and Mizzium Mortars is for the matchups where excuse me, they're playing a lot of 4/4s, so that I can't deal with. So certain creatures that have 4 toughness and 4 power that I can't remove with lightning strikes or shocks are things like a Blood Baron of Viscopa. So there's Blood Baron of Viscopa, Loxodon Smiter. He's another popular one. If I'm ever playing a green-white deck, I pretty much always expect a Loxodon Smiter. Storm Breath is quite popular on red deck wind decks or mono red devotion decks. So these are all 4. Loxodon Smiter especially is pretty hard to deal with early on because it's only 3 mana for 4/4 and it can't be countered. So that's something I have to deal with when it hits the board. So that's why I have to sideboard in those Mizzium Mortars to deal with those. Stormbreath Dragon comes later on in the game, same as Blood Baron, but still it's something that I really just can't deal with once it's on the board because it's flying. I can't have no way to block it, and unless I have Lightning Strike and a Shock to double burn it, it's not the most ideal situation for me. Blood Baron is not flying or anything like that, so I can block it. The lifelink is sort of a problem, but I honestly don't think Blood Baron's a very good card, only in specific matchups, and even then, I don't really have too much of a problem destroying it. I have used a Lightning Strike, and a Shock to destroy Blood Baron before, but that's only because it was for the win, and the guy was pretty mad about that. He was like, "Are you kidding me?" But like, I don't think Blood Baron's an extremely good card, but that's just my opinion. It's good in some matchups, and it's good in certain situations. And the lifelink's nice, but unless you absolutely need the life, it's not overly important. Like, it's a rare circumstance where, you know, people do have under 10 life, and you have over 30 life. That has to go over the course of a certain amount of time. And before then, he doesn't get flying until then, and he doesn't become a 10/10 until he has 30 life and I have 10 life. I have under 10 life. So till then, he's only a 4/4, and I'm not playing white or black, so there's really no good way for this card to get around things. And if he does attack in, I'm fine with just casting a Quicken to trigger Nivix and then making Nivix a 4/4 and trading with him. I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, Blood Baron, taking out a Blood Baron is fine. And even then, they don't really run too many Blood Barons. They usually only run a couple of them. So that's why I have Mizzium Mortars in there, just to deal with these cards, just with one card, so I don't have to do it with a Shock and a Lightning Strike. Peak Eruption, can't remember if I talked about that. Peak Eruption is just there for the Chain to the Rocks, to get rid of the mountain that the Chain to the Rocks is enchanted to. It's the only reason to play that card is for Chain to the Rocks anyways, unless you're playing a purely land destruction deck. It's nice, destroy a mountain, take rid of one of their lands, deal 3 damage to them, and get one of my creatures back. So that's pretty much all the reasoning is behind that one. Skullcrack is for the matchup where there is that opportune moment. There's always an opportune moment sometimes where someone needs to gain life to get back in the game. I've had those matchups, I've played those matchups, and I have lost matchups because they've gained that little bit of life they need. Otherwise, I would have won. So I'm only including one of for those opportune moments where it's at the point where, because this deck plays out pretty fast, it forces them, if they do have those cards, they have to pull off an early Sphinx's Revelation or an early Grey Merchant of Asphodel to get back in the game with that little bit of life they get. So Skullcrack prevents that as well as doing damage to them. It's also nice for those moments where I do swing in with a big Niv Magus Elemental or something like that, and they try to prevent damage. Skullcrack prevents damage prevention from happening. So they can't prevent damage even through stuff like Druid's Deliverance or Brave the Elements. So that's always nice, because if they do swing in and I have blockers up and they think that they swing in with everything and they play Brave the Elements to protect their creatures from, you know, red or blue, Skullcrack prevents that, and I can just block them and swing back for the win. So that's what I'm only including one of, because there's only certain circumstances where I need to do that.
Look what I got.
Had to pause it there. Sister wanted to talk to me. Yeah, the only rare circumstance where Skullcrack is applicable. I mean, more often than not, I'd rather just run Lightning Strikes, just because it can target creatures and stuff like that. Skullcrack is just there for those specific situations. Spellheart is the card I'm going to be bringing in for when I need to adopt more of a late game strategy and use my instants and sorceries typical to Magic Man Sam's video, where he plays around Spellheart, controlling the board, and then playing Spellheart for a really big, a really strong hitting flying trample creature. So pretty much whenever I'm going to be bringing in all my Skullcrack, well, pretty much when I'm going to be bringing my Negates, Essence Scatters, Mizzium Mortars, and Magma Jets, those are the cards I'm going to be bringing in mainly with Spellheart. I'd probably take out Niv Magus Elemental, I'll probably take out a couple Hidden Strings, and then I'll put those ones in. Maybe a Quicken. Just sort of switch the type of deck around and adopt more of a control burn strategy around Spellheart rather than an aggressive beatdown strategy with Niv Magus. So it's nice that you can sort of flip the board with that. And yeah, that's pretty much my deck. Having a lot of fun with it. It's really good, and it's pretty tough to pilot, but it's really rewarding when you do. There's a lot of different ways you can play it out, which is nice, and it has quite a few outs and stuff like that. So I really like it. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and people underestimate some of the cards, which is always nice. I love having people ask me why I'm playing that card, but they soon realize it. And you know, once Niv Magus becomes incredibly huge, I mean, getting 3 pumps off of him makes him what, a 7/8, which is very, very strong. And through exiling all this stuff, I'm still getting tokens out of Young Pyromancer, and I'm still allowing Nivix to attack for 4 damage or even more. So a lot of good synergy between my creatures, and it still does have some work to do, but I could see it at least becoming maybe even FNM viable in the future. Hopefully we get some really good cards from Born of the Gods, but right now this is working out quite well for me, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you guys have any questions or comments about the deck, just leave them below, or any suggestions even. That'd be great. And I'll definitely be back with some more deck techs. I have some other decks I'm working on, and I'll definitely put those in Magic the Gathering Online and showing them to you guys. But again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll definitely talk to you guys later.